Hello, I'm David. This is Sapiens Forward with news and discussion about AI topics that matter to regular people. Today is June 13th, 2025. And in this show, we're going to cover some news topics that have come across my feed in the last couple of days, which I think you ought to know about. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So, first atop the list, Ohio State University implements mandatory AI training for all students. So, apparently, Ohio State University here in the United States has announced that all students will be required to use artificial intelligence starting later this year, making them fluent in combining conventional learning with AI. So, university president there, Walter Carter, says that this should prepare students to lead in a future where the workforce is going to be influenced and require AI systems. So I think this is rather interesting and worth sharing. They use the term calling this making students bilingual in their major and AI applications. It's kind of an interesting take on it. I don't really think AI is a language necessary, but I see what they're doing there. They're trying to make it a tie-in. Maybe merging two different styles of education. Um, but but yeah, I think this is probably influenced by the US government executive orders from the Trump administration about um, embedding and integrating artificial intelligence literacy with artificial intelligence tools, AI tools, into the educational systems in the United States. I think we're going to see more and more of these types of programs at universities. There are some schools initially that are trying to figure out how to deal with AI in the sense of it being a part of student activities, and they don't necessarily want it to. Educators at all different levels are trying to figure out what to do next. Then there's other schools which are just leaning into it. I mean, we've shared stories about schools in the United States that started a almost completely AI program at the primary school level, a charter school, I think in Arizona, if I recall correctly, and how the teachers there are more like facilitators and they use a very AI driven curriculum. And then we have schools like Ohio State here who are looking to lean into the AI forward process and make literacy on how to utilize AI a requirement. I would say, they're probably at minds if we can't beat them, figure out how to make it a part of what we do and incorporate that into the program. I think that's the smart approach. I don't really think that there's any getting away from the idea of AI being a part of education. It doesn't necessarily have to be completely terrible. I think with AI, one of the main principles that I share about AI on my channel here is that AI is here and we have to accept that, embrace it really, because it's not going anywhere. We regular people like me and you, we can't effectively make AI go away. We can either ignore it or we can accept that as part of reality and figure out how to make it a part of our life in a way that benefits our life in a positive way. Similarly, with education, and certainly educational systems, they have to figure out, well, AI is here. How do we benefit from AI without having it be detrimental to education? So, yes, I definitely think this is the right way to go. I mean, the Pew Research Center, they say something like, we got the statistic here, something like 26% of teenagers have used ChatGPT for schoolwork in 2024, double from the figures from 2023. So usage going up, and I'm sure we'll see that it's increased even more in 2025 when we get figures on that, months from now. So they're going to be using it, figure out how to make sure that it's not just something a few students are taking advantage of and somehow benefiting from. Make sure all students know how to use some of these tools. And some of these tools are pretty great. I mean, you look at some examples like AI and uh, Note GPT. They got some really clever tools that aren't necessarily about cheating. They're rather about synthesizing learning materials on the fly. Like you can take maybe a syllabus, you can take some of your materials that maybe your teacher might provide. You can drop them into these tools and they can create flashcards for you and notes and quizzes that you can practice with. And I think that is beneficial. I think that is a good thing. That might make the teachers' lives easier. It gives more resources for the students. Certainly, what we don't want to see are students, completely bypassing the point of a lesson or an exercise by having the AI tool write an essay for them. Like maybe collect some research. That's beneficial, help them collect research, but the student needs to write it. And where's it going to go from there? In that particular area, I think it remains tricky. I'm sure universities are going to be updating their codes of conduct and that sort of thing to deal with those types of situations. They'll be using tools. to detect if AI seems to have been used in the drafting of content. But that's a dicey proposition because there's false positives and that sort of thing. The technology, still advancing. So I think we're going to see more of this regardless. I think we're going to see more universities adopting kind of an AI acceptance sort of approach, and then helping make sure that all students at their organization can learn how to take advantage of it, and in a way that is going to be positive for their overall education. Well, let's take a look at the next story, which again is talking about education. So this is over in China. So China temporarily disabled AI chatbots during the national college entrance exams. Chinese AI companies essentially shut down their chatbot tools that are available to users over there in China during this annual college entrance exam period. It's called the gaokao. It's a pretty big deal. But some of these popular services like Alibaba's Gwyn and ByteDance's Daobao, they blocked all kinds of features or just completely cut access entirely. But this exam series, the gaokao, I think I'm saying it properly, it's this really crucial kind of 3 day, just really intensive examination process. And something like 13 million students are competing for limited university spots. So they are taking these exams looking to really figure out ultimately where their position is going to be in the educational system based on their performance. So it's a big deal, a lot of pressure. And in that type of environment, that type of scenario with so much on the line, I can understand how young people, even anybody really, would feel pressured to use any kind of advantage possible. And let's be honest, these AI tools in certain types of situations and scenarios of knowledge based types of work or examination are incredibly powerful and useful tools. But when people are parroting, answers back from AI tools instead of demonstrating their own knowledge, it's kind of defeating the purpose of examinations. So, you can see why there would be this idea to limit access. When I've talked about what are some of the options we have for educational systems dealing with AI, one of the methods that could be employed is just to remove the possibility that AI could be utilized, at least for some time until hyper, micro devices for you know playing audio and speaking to and interacting with AI tools that could be wearable. Hyper miniaturized stuff is not quite there yet. With like a portable local AI device, but who knows? Maybe in a few years, right, or sooner. Until we have those types of things, where it's literally out of like a science fiction movie. If you just literally just have like a metal detector or something like that, and say no phones, no devices, anything. You're just there with a pen and paper, and you fill out answers on a paper exam, or you have to write an essay or speak live in front of a group. Well, there you go. I mean, you then get a sense for what a person actually knows. Now, a lot of students over here would go back to the story in China. They just straight up just shut down AI tools. You just want to make sure. That's pretty remarkable to me. That's a level of commitment and integration in a society at that level to ensure academic rigor and a testing process. It's impressive. I really wonder if that sort of level of kind of nationwide adherence to that academic rigor with AI systems of here would be possible, shutting down that sort of thing. But apparently, no announcements were made. Various components of systems were disabled. Um, and then reportedly, AI surveillance tools are utilized to monitor student behavior. So that's kind of funny. Not all AI tools were made accessible. Um, but I think that's interesting, worth sharing. I feel like solutions like that and approaches are going to be utilized in different ways around the world, where we're going to have to figure out how do we assess what people know in order to develop that next generation of people going into the workforce, going into higher education. Because if everybody is just essentially cheating with AI tools, ChatGPT or whatnot, I mean, you can't reasonably be assured what anybody knows. So these types of solutions and approaches, they're going to be different. They're going to be rolled out in different ways. We're going to figure out what works, what doesn't. But there's going to see more of this. And some colleges will be different from others. It'll be interesting to see what everybody's experiences. Those people starting into college, now in the next couple of years, it's going to be an interesting time. All right, let's go to the next story. So, reports emerge of ChatGPT users experiencing mental health episodes. So, I've seen some reports of these types of things come across my feed and stuff on the internet and news media with much more sensational language. But to kind of put it plainly, some mental health professionals at places very reputable like Stanford and Columbia, they report these concerning cases of people developing intense obsessions with AI tools like ChatGPT. And there's other ones out there like that really have kind of a persona-based product like Character AI. But these are kind of leading to what they would classify as severe psychological episodes. Essentially, users are experiencing delusions, just really referring to AI as actual people that they know. In some cases, I'm seeing stories that referring to AI as mama, like it's their parent or something like that. But really developing these delusions around the idea that these AI systems are orchestrating their lives and pulling all the strings, and they're just letting the AI just make decisions for them. People are talking to the AI system like, "Hey, what should I do?" The phenomenon being referred to, starting to be developed, the term for it called Chat GPT induced psychosis. Well, I think this is worrying. I think it's concerning, but I also, on the other hand, I don't think it's particularly surprising. I mean, for as clever as we like to think of ourselves as human beings, I think at our core, you know, we're potentially fragile emotionally, mentally. Sometimes we find ways to be incredibly tough in very dire situations, and other times, a broken heart can like just bring a person down, right? And there's a lot of pain in the world. People trying to get through life. There's tough things going on throughout the world, and it's understandable. People dealing with tough times in life and need someone to turn to, someone to listen. I can see why these AI tools are starting to develop a following in that kind of fashion. Is it really so surprising? I don't think so. But this is worrying because these are products and they're a technology that is still being developed. And even some of the leading luminaries in the field at some of these big AI companies have admitted that, just like how with the human brain, we're still learning about it and don't know precisely how every aspect of it works. Same thing with some of these neural net based large language model AI tools. Still kind of figuring out like, why did it say this thing in this case and say something different this time? There's still working out the nature of how these systems operate. And so there's a certain amount of frontier, and that word's used in the AI space about some of these models that are bleeding edge. There's a frontier here where we're figuring things out and learning how they work. To take these tools and then for people to latch onto them so readily in such an intimate and personal way, I think is risky. For some people, might be particularly vulnerable, is maybe the word to put there. To that, with the advanced voice model that ChatGPT put out in their most recent updates, just I think a week ago now. It's remarkable how lifelike it sounds, and so I don't think it is so unfair to suggest that people could easily just start thinking of it as real. If you watch the movie Her that came out some years ago, um, it's much more poignant now. Going back and watching that movie and seeing how things are developing. So I thought this was an interesting story. Wanted to put this one out there. I think people need to be careful. We get some tough times sometimes, and vulnerable folks, they turn to somebody to listen to or to talk to, and these AI tools, I mean, they change it up. They change the model, they update it, they change some of the training and the weights in the model and that sort of thing, and it starts reacting differently. And that could be dangerous for people who are in a kind of fragile state. So I think that we're probably going to see a burgeoning field in psychology and counseling and therapy for some other type of addictive or rehabilitative type of counseling related to AI. I think that's going to be a new field. People starting schooling in that type of vocation now, and psychology and therapy, that sort of thing. I wouldn't be surprised if that's going to start finding its way into the curriculum, and in a clinical sense, professionals start learning how they deal with this new type of phenomenon. All right, let's go to the next story. UK Tech Secretary advocates AI support for dyslexic students. I think this is a really great story, personally. Now, I don't have a lot of experience with dyslexia. I am aware of it. I've read about it, but I don't experience it. I don't know anybody personally who has. I understand, it can be rather difficult for young people and for children who have dyslexia and they are trying to make their way through the educational environment, right? Um, and having additional tools available that can help them to learn and to overcome educational hurdles that maybe other children don't have to deal with, it just seems like a really great thing. As much as possible, I feel it's important to try and set up an equitable educational environment for young people. It's a shame when some people, just through luck, I guess, or bad luck, I guess, if you're looking at it a different way, have these different trajectories through the early stages of their life, through education and schooling. So because something they have no control over, right? And they were born that way. And now they need to figure it out and work through that. And they might have parents who are like, I don't know how to deal with this. I'm not sure even how it works. How do I help my child? You have teachers who may not be well equipped. Um, and there's side effects to that sort of thing. I'm sure of it. When a student is struggling in school, a poor child, I mean, they might feel bullied for not being as confident or doing as well in their early classes, that sort of thing, and that can really snowball over time. So having tools that are available that can help these children in their educational process in a personalized way, to tutor them in a way that is understood, that will benefit their learning process and help them stay on track, I think is a wonderful idea. I think there's going to be a lot of meta learning about how to utilize these tools for that, as we go. But this is very much the kind of thing when I talk about one of the AI principles, that AI is not all bad and it's not all good. I think this is an example of AI being used for something very good. This is the kind of stuff we want. We don't necessarily want AI to be doing all of our creative work for us and taking over the fun things we could do. We want it to do like the busy work that we don't want to be doing. We want it to help us solve problems that we have difficulty solving. That's what we want AI for. And here's a difficult challenge that we need help with that can really help people who are the most needy, which are like young folks. So great story, really positive thing to read about. So I look forward to seeing more and more of this type of thing. So well done over there in the UK. And, I think there is some benefits to the idea of like a very top-down approach to integration of AI into educational systems, like we're seeing in the US, is that there could be more of a push to get tools and systems like this made available to schools. So we can see that made available in a more ubiquitous way. All right. And the next story. So AI chatbots providing inaccurate information about the Los Angeles protests. So this is very timely, and I just kind of wanted to dig into a little bit, but not so much on the political side of things. This is not a political channel. I don't want to talk about, the reason around the protests and that sort of thing. Stuff happens. It's an important and meaningful topic, so I'm not going to make light of it. Um, but it is the case that protests and important events in the public eye happen around the world all the time. And what is notable about that, which I think connects with AI here, that I do want to talk about briefly, is information about those events and how everybody else in the world or the country hear about those things. So I'm not in Los Angeles, so I haven't seen the stuff going on there firsthand. Everything I know about it is through the news and secondhand, that sort of deal. And that's the way most of us find out about major events that go down. Now we're in the age of AI, and we've seen some of the tools that have been released in the last few months, some of them video and image based AI tools, and them demonstrating just incredible capability to produce lifelike, realistic um, just indistinguishable, like imagery and video is indistinguishable from the real thing. The only thing that might suggest to you that they were fake was just how crazy they were and ridiculous looking, right? If they were made to be looking realistic, you might not really know. So that's an important component here. But also, I think there's another side that I want to touch on, which is not only do we have AI tools which are becoming incredibly capable, we have a general audience for using those tools and have available to them who are becoming seemingly very readily accepting of what the information is they're getting from them. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily a new trait. I think there's a portion of the population that has always been rather accepting of what they've been told. I mean, if we go back a few years with the dawn of the internet, it's kind of a thing that was said for a while, which was don't believe everything you read on the internet, because before that, you got your news either from a newspaper or by watching the nightly news, that sort of thing, um, or talking to people about it, right? Crazy, right? Then the internet came out and it sort of reduced the barrier to entry to be able to disseminate information, right? Because you didn't have to buy airtime on a TV channel. You didn't have to pay money to get a print of paper. It still probably costs money, but relatively speaking, much lower. So you could put up a website, you could share information, and a number of like kind of journalist type websites and sites and people involved with that just increased dramatically. So of course, there's the potential for that for misinformation or just incorrect information to be spread. We've reached with these AI tools another inflection point in this trajectory of information development and dissemination. So now the access to information and news is just potentially instantaneous, right? And so you have tools on like X.com Grok, the Grok AI that, X.com has an XAI. So people, on X are just, they can interact with the Grok AI bot and just ask questions about stuff. You can use ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or Manus or any of these tools and just chat with them and ask questions. What's going on here? What's this about? And I'm seeing reports that there's false information about these events going down over in Los Angeles right now in the United States, right? Grok reportedly incorrectly claiming some photos were from Afghanistan in 2021, not LA, not Los Angeles in 2025. I mean, it seems like some of the areas there, there's some pretty rough stuff happening with rioting and whatnot. So, maybe it's somebody looked at it like, oh, is that what's going on there? But I mean, with a little bit of introspection, you can really, okay, well, no, it looks like a totally different place. Or ChatGPT misidentifying National Guard photos of being from like the Kabul airport in Afghanistan. It's seeing soldiers and thinking, okay, that's where it's from. It's kind of strange that these tools are simultaneously being built as just being so close to artificial general intelligence, and yet at the same time looking at photos and being completely wrong and off by many years, and even that the nature of where the context of the photo is. But if you just took somebody from off the street, as it were, you're out there and just interviewing folks like, hey, show me this photo. It's like, where do you think this is at? And if they had to answer in 1 second, like, I don't know, is that Afghanistan or Los Angeles? If you look at it from that standpoint, it doesn't sound so crazy, right? But still, that's just kind of an isolated example of maybe an interview on the street. But there are now millions of people interacting with these AI tools on a daily basis. I mean, the user growth in them, was just straight up, on the chart, on the graph, right? And so that's only increased like every month. And so it's not going to be long before everybody in the world has access to AI tools, and they're going to be using it to ask like, hey, what's going on right now? What's the point of this? And that's worrying because if it's telling something different to everybody, and if it's saying the wrong thing, then if the spread of information is just going to be so rapid, people are going to be wondering what is actually happening. If you mix that with the idea of that video could potentially be made that's completely fake, but shows something that's totally not true, that certainly compounds the problem. So ultimately, I think, fact checking is going to be incredibly difficult in the coming years. There's going to have to be new systems that come about that are, I think, partially already in the works that deal with digital watermarking, that sort of thing. Um, but we're going to have to see how media agencies work with tech companies to be able to validate information and have some checks and balances there to ensure that information can be validated to be truthful and not just propagating just blatantly false stuff. We see some changes with platforms like YouTube about potentially generated content and that sort of thing, and start has some built-in filtering and that sort of deal. So we're seeing the early stages of tools and systems and processes that can be put in place to deal with this type of issue, but it's not going to be instantaneous, and it's not going to be nearly as fast, unfortunately, as the degree to which the information and capabilities of the AI tools themselves propagate. So there's going to be this lag time where the tools are going to be super powerful, and our ability to validate and manage the information those tools can put out is going to be dragging behind. So that's going to be tricky, and I think that's a stage we're now entering, and that's going to be a tough area to deal with. We're just going to have to hold tight. We're going to have to keep our wits about us and be very discerning with the information you see on the internet. Try and as much as you can trust live resources and people, but ultimately, just as we said for many years, don't trust everything you see on the internet. Well, that's the stories for today. Thanks so much for checking it out. If you find this kind of information and content helpful, hey, please give a like and subscribe or follow on the channel. Be sure to keep in touch, and you'll be able to get more content as we go. Anyway, thanks so much again for checking out. Take care, and we'll see you next time.